They didn't just change the locks, they sold the entire house while she was out of town. But how does that even happen legally unless someone planned this way before she got home?
My key wouldn't turn. I stood there twisting it harder and harder until the metal actually bent in my hand, while a stranger stared at me through the little glass window beside my front door. Then he opened it and said, "Ma'am, you need to leave. We bought this house." I had flown home from a work trip less than an hour earlier. Same address, same porch swing, same cracked flower pot by the steps. Except now the locks were changed, my furniture was gone, and somebody else's family photos were sitting inside my living room. I called my mother right there in the driveway, shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. And the first thing she said was, "You weren't supposed to come back until Friday." That's when I realized this wasn't some paperwork mistake. My parents had actually sold my house. But the part that still makes me sick happened the next morning, when the courthouse clerk looked at my file, went completely pale, and whispered, "Ma'am, we need to talk right now." She led me away from the front counter so quickly she almost knocked over her chair. The courthouse was packed that morning, people arguing over parking tickets, custody hearings, somebody crying near the elevators, but suddenly it felt completely silent around me. The clerk kept glancing back like she was afraid someone might overhear us. I remember clutching the strap of my purse so tightly my fingers hurt. "My name is Teresa," she said quietly as she shut the office door behind us. "I need you to stay calm while I explain this." Stay calm? I almost laughed at that. Less than 12 hours earlier, I'd been standing outside my own house while strangers unpacked dishes into my kitchen cabinets. My kitchen. The house my grandmother left me before she died. The same house my parents spent years complaining about because she'd given it to me instead of keeping it in the family equally. Teresa sat down at a computer and pulled up a file. Then she turned the monitor toward me. There it was, my address, my name, and a deed transfer stamped and approved by the county. Sold 3 weeks earlier. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It looked exactly like mine. For a second, my brain actually tried to convince me maybe I had signed something without realizing it. Some digital form, some travel document, something. But then Teresa opened another scanned page. A notarized authorization form. My driver's license. My signature again. And underneath it all, my parents' names. Richard Mercer. Linda Mercer. My chest tightened so fast I couldn't breathe properly. "No," I said immediately. "No, I never signed any of this." Teresa didn't answer right away. That scared me more than if she had argued. She just kept looking at the screen with this uncomfortable expression, like she was trying to decide how much to tell me. Finally, she asked very carefully, "Ms. Mercer, did you know there was a guardianship hearing filed in your name 6 months ago?" I felt my stomach drop. "A what?" Teresa swallowed hard. Then she reached into the file folder beside her and pulled out paperwork with a judge's signature across the bottom. "According to these records," Teresa said carefully, "your parents were granted temporary authority over your financial affairs." I just stared at her. The words didn't even make sense together. "My parents can't control my finances," I said. "I'm 34 years old." "I understand," she replied softly, "but the court approved a petition claiming you were mentally unfit to manage property after your grandmother's death." The room tilted for a second. Mentally unfit. I actually looked around the office like maybe someone was filming a prank video. "This is insane," I said. "I never went to court. I was never evaluated. Nobody contacted me." Teresa nodded slowly, like she already knew what my answer would be. "That's why I brought you back here privately." She slid another paper toward me. A notice of hearing, mailed months ago. Except the address listed wasn't my apartment near my office downtown. It was my parents' address. I felt cold all over. "They handled my mail sometimes when I traveled," I whispered. Suddenly, dozens of small moments started rearranging themselves in my head. My mother insisting she'd organize paperwork while I was away for work. My father asking me to email copies of tax documents because insurance needed updated records. The weird comments about the house sitting empty too often. You should just sell it. You barely live there. Your grandmother never should have put that burden on you. At the time, it sounded like nagging. Now it sounded planned.
See, this is the part that bothered me later. Because changing the locks is one thing, but planning it for months?
Teresa lowered her voice even more. There's something else concerning about this file, she said. She clicked open the sale records. The house had been sold in cash. No financing delays, no mortgage review. Closed in less than 10 days. Fast. Way too fast. Then Teresa looked directly at me and asked, "Did either of your parents ever have legal power of attorney over you?" "No," I said instantly. Her face tightened. And that's when she said the sentence that made my pulse spike all over again. "Then somebody worked very hard to make this look legal." By noon, I was sitting across from a real estate attorney named Greg Holloway, watching him flip through copies of documents like he was trying to find the exact moment my life went off the rails. His office overlooked downtown, but I barely noticed the view. I hadn't slept, I hadn't eaten. My phone kept buzzing with calls from my mother that I refused to answer. Greg stopped suddenly on one page. Then he frowned. "Why were you declared mentally unfit 6 months ago?" The way he asked it, flat, professional, like it was already established fact, made my stomach twist. "I wasn't," I said immediately. He turned the document toward me. Temporary guardianship petition, filed by Linda and Richard Mercer. Supporting statements attached. The words blurred together at first, but then I caught phrases that made my skin crawl. Emotional instability, erratic decision-making, inability to manage inherited assets responsibly. I looked up at him. This isn't real. Greg's expression changed slightly, not disbelief, concern. "These filings were approved by a judge," he said carefully. "That means someone submitted supporting evidence." He opened another attachment, medical recommendations. Apparently, I'd been evaluated after suffering psychological deterioration following my grandmother's death. Only I had never met the doctor listed, never attended any evaluation, never even heard the clinic's name before that moment. My parents had built an entire legal story around me without me knowing. And because the guardianship existed, the house sale looked legitimate on paper. I suddenly understood why the buyers acted so confident, why the title company approved everything, why nobody questioned the signatures. Greg leaned back in his chair. "If this becomes public," he said, "these records could affect your professional reputation until they're overturned." I felt sick, not just robbed, erased. Then Greg opened the final witness page, and my entire body went numb. At the bottom, under supporting family testimony, was a name I recognized instantly, Ethan Mercer, my younger brother. Right as I stared at it, my phone started ringing again. This time, it was Ethan calling me. I answered immediately. "Tell me this isn't true." For a second, all I heard was breathing. Then Ethan said quietly, "Ava, I didn't know what they were really doing." An hour later, I met him at a diner off the highway near his apartment. He looked awful, pale, exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. The second he sat down, he avoided eye contact. "I thought they were refinancing," he said. "Mom told me you were struggling after Grandma died and needed help managing things." I stared at him across the table. "You testified against me in court." "I didn't know it was court testimony," he shot back quickly. "Dad handed me papers and said they needed a family statement for financial authorization." The waitress approached, but neither of us ordered anything. Ethan kept rubbing his hands together nervously. Then he finally said the part that explained everything. "Our dad owes a lot of money." I felt my chest tighten again. "How much?" "Enough that people started showing up at the house." Apparently, Richard had been hiding gambling debts for over a year. Credit cards, personal loans, sports betting accounts. Debt collectors had already threatened lawsuits. And according to Ethan, my mother became obsessed with the house after that. She kept saying Grandma gave you the one thing that could save all of us, he admitted quietly. Then the details got worse. My mother intercepted my mail while I traveled for work, used copies of my ID from old tax folders, convinced an elderly notary that I'd already signed documents remotely. Every piece was deliberate, every step planned months ahead. I felt physically sick listening to it, not because strangers had lived in my house, because my own parents sat at dinner with me while building a legal case to take it away. That night, Greg filed emergency fraud motions with the court, and before sunrise the next morning, Teresa called me personally. Her voice sounded tense. "The judge reviewed your file overnight," she said. "Ms. Mercer, this is turning into a criminal investigation." By the time I walked into the emergency hearing that morning, the entire courthouse felt different. People were moving faster. Clerks whispered to each other when my case file changed hands. Even Greg looked more serious than he had the day before. Then I saw my parents sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father looked furious. Not ashamed, not guilty, angry. Like I was the one causing problems by showing up. The hearing started quietly. The judge reviewed the guardianship order, the deed transfer, and the emergency fraud filings Greg submitted overnight. Then, everything unraveled. One by one, investigators laid out the scheme. The court notices had been mailed to my parents' address instead of mine. The psychological evaluations attached to the guardianship petition came from a medical office connected to one of my mother's friends. The signatures authorizing the sale were inconsistent under forensic review, and the notary admitted she never personally witnessed me sign anything. I watched my father's face slowly lose color as the judge asked direct questions he couldn't answer. "How did you obtain authority over property solely owned by your adult daughter?" Silence. My mother finally spoke. "We were trying to save the family." The judge's expression hardened instantly. "You attempted to strip your daughter of her legal rights through fraudulent filings." Hearing those words out loud made something inside me finally crack. For 2 days, I'd been operating on pure adrenaline, but sitting there, listening to strangers explain how my own parents created a false story that painted me as mentally unstable, I couldn't hold myself together anymore. I started crying right there in court. Not loud, not dramatic, just exhausted, humiliated, completely blindsided by people I trusted my entire life. Then Ethan stood up. His voice shook while he admitted he signed documents without understanding what they were. He apologized directly to me in front of everyone. My mother started crying too, but even then she kept trying to justify it. "She had the house," she said. "We had nothing left." I looked straight at her. "You could have asked me for help," I said quietly. "Instead, you erased me." The courtroom went completely silent. By the end of the hearing, the judge suspended the sale pending reversal proceedings and referred the case for criminal investigation immediately. Daniel and his wife, the couple living in my house, were ruled innocent buyers deceived by fraudulent records. Their losses would be covered through title insurance. A week later, investigators officially charged my father with fraud and forgery-related offenses. The woman who falsified the medical evaluations lost her license and faced criminal charges too. And my mother? What destroyed her wasn't jail. It was exposure. Family members stopped defending her once the court records became public. Friends disappeared. Neighbors talked. Everyone learned exactly what she'd done. Months later, I finally got legal ownership of my house back. But I didn't move in right away. Every room carried the weight of what happened. So I restored it slowly, one wall at a time, one room at a time. And the day I was finally ready to sleep there again, I stood at the front door holding a brand new key in my hand. The last time I tried opening that door, I found strangers living inside my life. This time, the lock turned smoothly. And when the door opened, it was finally mine again.
Honestly, Honestly, the scary part isn't that one family did this, it's realizing how many signature court filings and approvals can happen before someone even knows they are being erased.